You know, I have an interesting question for you guys. How well do you think you know people around you? How well do you think you know everyone around you, your own family, lovers and friends? How well do you think you really know them? Let me tell you something. These are facts. I gave 90% of my money away, recorded in 2004, to all my family, loved ones and friends and people suffering around me. 90% of my money, millions of dollars. When I went to prison for 10 years, and this is how I treated my family and loved ones, I looked after them and gave them hundreds of thousands of dollars and looked after everybody. When I went to prison for 10 years, they were the first people to serve me. My own family, lovers and friends, who I gave thousands of dollars to, recorded in 2004, in the Supreme Court examination, were the first people to desert me. How well do you think you know your family, lovers and friends? Go to prison for 10 years and you'll find out. I'm serious about this. You don't know your family, lovers and friends the way you think you do. You discover that when something like this happens. You know, you fall out with most people. Most of your friends, you don't even have many. You don't have faith in many people in real life. Those are facts. I can honestly sit here and say that I have more people that have faith in me than any one of you out there. Because I'm different than you. I don't use the tools you do. When I went to prison, I learned more about a person in 5 weeks than you learn about your best friends in 5 years. In about 12 months, you learn more about them than you know about your best friends for 25 years. You learn a lot more about real people when you see what kind of people come to jail. When you realize that people on drugs who take drugs to numb themselves, 16% of them are evil and 84% of them has the highest moral standards in the world and the biggest mental health research ever conducted. They know how to address their offending behaviour and their moral values and their offending behaviour and the domino effect with morals, empathy and remorse. But then you see atheists come in and people, child sex offenders and gay people, and they can't go through these programs because they've got no moral values. And that goes for the most psychotic killers in the world, the drunks and the alcohols, the people that are not like us, everybody else in the world. They come in for the most pathetic crimes in the world, can't address their offending behaviour, can't pass the programs, and live in denial about it. And they're the biggest liars in the world. They can only catch 5% of all child sex offenders because they lie that good. That's some normal Western civilization. In the underground world, we're not the kid fuckers, right? And we address our offending behaviour, and they catch 96% of us because we always plead guilty to our crimes for starters. When we know we're guilty and we're not that ashamed of it. We know how bad and we know we're not in the right mind and we just fend for ourselves. Yes, 16% are evil, but today the biggest evidence in the world is recorded that all the Western civilization in the normal people has the lowest moral standards in the world and we have the highest. End of story. What truth are you really living in? What truth are you really living in? We use our moral values in the right place and we use our intuition. We use our loyalty, honor, respect, moral, morals, inspiration, encouragement. You know why? Go to jail for 10 years and you find out. After 7 years, we discover something you don't discover. Freedom in prison you can't find outside. And then when we come out, we don't want to go back to your environment. We go off the grid. We get away from everyone else because we don't want to go back to the way we were. Because we know the system put us into that. We know we went to school, and when we went to school, we used psych-op programs with the high IQ to make us think we're intelligent. Well, some of us didn't do that. We escaped school by 12. We thought, fuck that. We're using our moral values with our intuition in the right path and hanging around with our mates in the street, right? Because they fend for themselves and use those moral values in the right place. Unlike the Western civilization, we knew that. So we left school and didn't like school because we knew it was evil, pure evil, and inverting people. We didn't want to be inverted. We used our moral values like 0 to 7, and we knew our instincts was very powerful. We use our moral values, right, to think instinctively and think outside the mind, move 7 times faster. And then we went to school to become inverted and stupid with a brain stupid with a high IQ. We didn't like that. We didn't like to be stupid and dysfunctional and psychological and then suffer the human condition, but all of us suffered it. Every single one of us, no matter what. We were all inverted to one degree or another because of the whole system, the way people are. So I went into human conditioning. I suffered stress, fear and anxiety, took drugs to numb myself because I was suffering depression and anxiety. So I took drugs to numb myself, which is the sixth sense, right? Open up the sixth sense, opens up the third eye. Don't you take drugs to numbing yourself when you're suffering? So you feel better when you take drugs, right? From being psychological. So people take drugs all over the world. 93% of people in the whole world takes methamphetamine or ADHD medication for the same reason. And they lie about it. Or they take one other type of mental drug or stress-related drug or some happy pill. Right? Whether it's designed, right? Whether it's through the system, whether it's illegal or not. So 93% of all Western civilization takes drugs and then accuse everyone else for taking drugs when they take drugs anyway. Or take the same drug delivery system that causes the same adverse effect in one tool or another. Okay, I'll go into a lot of details about this. Everybody used the same comfort zone, the same psycho programs, the same dysfunctional behavior, and suffer the consequences and lie about it because they're two-faced, but we're not. We're honest about it. But see, we discover freedom in prison that you can't discover outside, so we never take drugs to numb ourselves ever again and never suffer the consequences ever again neither. Because 97% of people that goes to prison over 7 years never goes back. 87% of people that goes into prison for 1, 2, or 3 years are like everyone else in the world. They always go back. They're like everyone else. They always go back. Everyone goes back, like a robot, to back to Google themselves. And we find freedom in prison you can't find outside. So just to let you know something, in the biggest mental health research in 2008, they discovered something and why you're in psycho programs and why you're completely inverted. Because everything was back to front. They discovered so many things were back to front in 2008. And they're trying to reverse that. But most people aren't listening because they're still using the same tools and accelerating 7 times faster. Because they're still using the same tools. They can't get out of this mindset. To give you an idea, they thought people went to prison for 10 years or 7 years or more, became mentally institutionalized and couldn't readapt to back outside. That's in our whole educational system on reverse psychology. Every single thing about reverse psychology and everything about ADHD and mental disorders are completely reverse psychology. All of it. And they're still using the same tools 7 times faster and the same medication. So they know nothing about it, right? So let me tell you something. We discovered, right, through the biggest mental health research by the biggest biologists in the world and the top 15,500 scientists, they're not telling you that we strip from our sixth sense. They're not even telling you in the mainstream media because all those people inverted, it controls the system, right? They are the systematic ones. They're in reverse psychology and come to every conclusion with reasoning. So they're not listening, not even telling you what the primary problem is. You're stripping your sixth sense. So you've got no basic common sense, but you've got a high IQ to think you're intelligent. And you use it all the time on psycho programs. And you think you're intelligent, believe in your own truth. And you think too much, 7 times more than in global history. And we escape that because that's how we suffer. We know we're not in our right mind. We know we're not in our right mind. So we discovered something that when we went to school, we became mentally institutionalized and suffered throughout our life with the human condition of stress, fear, anxiety, confusion, frustration, delusion, and paranoia. But we comply with the high IQ, right? Well, we became free from that in prison. And it takes a struggle of life for 7 years to be free and break free from the human condition you suffer from so much. Because that's inverted. And you were all inverted. We were all inverted. So was I. But I went through this experience for 7 years. And I was the first person in the world to bring the cure of the human condition to humanity with Jeremy, who's the top biologist in the world, for 5,000 years. You think it's by coincidence that I was the first person to bring this to humanity? Oh, but you don't believe in me. You throw stones at me, right? Because you believe in the system, right? And you believe in governments and authorities, right? And education systems, don't you? You believe in science professors, don't you? That's why you're sucked in dramatically and you don't even know who you are. But we break free from amnesia that you can't break free from. We discover who we are and we go back to childhood and realize that our tools from 0 to 7 was the most intelligent that we ever were when we masterminded a computer game between 3 and 7. And we were pumped with adrenaline to be alert, alive, waking, aware with a meth effect with adrenochrome, pumping our adrenaline and creating the molecules of immortality. That's funny because we also didn't suffer any confusion, frustration, right? So we go back to that when we wake up. So when we find freedom in prison, after 7 years, we go back to our childhood and discover who we are and then start using those tools. And then we start to explore those tools and explore those gifts that we came into this world with, that we were deceived from. And we were programmed not to use anymore on psycho programs, on reverse psychology with high IQ. Well, we suffered all the time. Well, we know we're not in our right mind because we suffer all the time. And then we escape from that. We come into prison and we go back to our moral state because in prison's like a concrete jungle where there's no governments and authorities and no system. And it's the elders that lead mankind like the Australian Aboriginals. And we live by the Vineyard rule equally because we have to. You've got to learn to love thy neighbour and love thy enemy. And then you live by those tools where you learn to love one another no matter what. And then you live by the one yard rule equally. How to govern life. It all comes automatic in this environment when there's no system. That's what you have to learn. It all comes automatically, and then we love one another in business burdens, and it all comes automatically. So does the 10 Commandments and the 10 that Jesus gave us, because we learn to love our enemy as well as our neighbour, because we live with them. So we live by those rules like the Australian Barriers and exactly the same things that Jesus taught us. And then we discover who we are by living by a natural environment and by organic state to think with our natural motor skills. When we get out of the mindset, but it takes a cycle of life to break free from amnesia. And you know what's funny? I think it's funny that a miracle's been created ever since then, and I've gone through miracles and I've died and come back. I just think it's funny that I've gone through that ever since, because what's funny is Jesus discovered he was at 24, and then he took 12 disciples, and for a cycle of 7 years of life, he broke them free from amnesia to discover who they were so they could do what he can and more. And that's thinking instinctively. And that's why we're told we come from the caves of the prison with the truth of the masses, like John did when he wrote Revelation, because we know the truth, how to convey feelings to thoughts, and that's how God communicates with us. Because once we break free, God communicates with us. And that's why I wrote my book. That's the evidence. Right? Just like John did. And that's how you break free from amnesia. It takes 7 years and a cycle of life off the grid, like a Shulam mastermind, a monk or a Buddha, or an underground figure like myself that knows these things, that went into the outback with the oldest and wisest civilization on the planet and lived by the same tools and the same atmosphere. So perhaps you might want to listen to what I have to say to you and wake up to yourself, because I know the truth that will set you free.